we're in the middle of something or the beginning of something that is at least as serious as the 2008 crisis. The government is extremely good at kicking the can, and like that's its primary skill in some ways. So it's hard to know exactly when things will be formally acknowledged as such. You know, I've got a bunch of slides that show that the economic situation is parlous, A. B, that the degree of collapse across a number of different industries, a number of different weaknesses will probably necessitate some form of bailouts or printing, even if it doesn't look exactly like 2008. A lot of what the financial system does is it evolves to evade last time's pattern recognition. And so it may not look exactly like it used to. Despite what form it comes in, whether it's like treasury buybacks or the people's QE, which are different ways of like injecting money into the system that don't look exactly like the 2008 bailouts, I do believe an enormous amount of money is going to be printed, just like Ray Dalio, just like a number of other people do. And in such a case, you want to have, quote, outside money, whether that is gold, whether that is a foreign fiat currency that you have faith in that's sort of outside the Fed's control, or whether that is Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin in particular is, built to be difficult to seize. I think that's part of the answer, and it's not the only thing. You want not just allocation. You want to think about other things in life, like where you live, your location. Again, Dalio also thinks of that as an important thing. The early 2010s, Janet Yellen was credibly reported as having known about the housing crisis, having seen it, and not raised the alarm. And the financial crisis was maybe officially acknowledged in September 2008, but of course it had been going on for years before then. It was just something where it became undeniable at that point. But I felt it was my responsibility, having put together what I had seen, to be like, you know what? It's a lot worse than people are saying. It's not just like a single bank crisis. It's not even just a banking crisis. It's a central banking crisis. The problems go all the way to the bedrock of the financial system in terms of treasuries being the new toxic waste. And it's going to be at least as bad as 2008, but probably worse than that, which is now several years ago. And I was like, this is the first time I've ever had a sinking feeling where it's like down and to the right, and that's mainly because I wasn't really looking at such graphs. I wasn't paying that much attention before the financial crisis. I was in academia at that time. I just wasn't looking at markets or whatever. But I've got that kind of feeling. Well, it was 2 days from the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank to the printing of $300 billion, even if they didn't call it printing. It was 2 weeks for $500 billion to move out of local banks to money market funds and to big banks and so on and so forth, for them to flee, right? It was 2 months to go from patient zero, the first patient being infected by COVID in the US, to lockdown. And it was January to March of 2020. It was 2 quarters from Bernanke declaring that it was a, quote, mild recession in April 2008 to the full-blown financial crisis being acknowledged in September 2008. Okay. Finally, it was 2 years for the USSR to go from superpower in 1989 to total collapse and non-existence in 1991. Okay. And so, the lesson of that is that too slow is too late, right? That was, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 quarters, 2 years. Too slow is too late.
And meaning if you don't react quickly, you're going to be too late.
Saying, which is when something is exponential, it always feels like you're reacting too early. And the reason is because you don't have the normal social cues around you. It's like flying by instruments as opposed to flying by looking out the window, right? Looking out the window, you can see nothing is wrong, but the instruments show actually beep, 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 there's a big mountain in front, so you should pull up, right? And you have to essentially trust your instruments at that point because nobody is saying anything, everybody's calm. And that's like absolute reckoning as opposed to relative reckoning. That's an unnatural way for humans to behave, especially when it comes to doing something atypical. You have to have that's what being an angel investor is like. That's what being an investor is like. I mean, the whole point, of course, you've heard buy low, sell high, right? Right? Because, right, if you're buying low, you're going against a crowd. If you're selling high, again, you're going against a crowd. Buying low, you're getting something when everybody else thinks it's a bad idea. You're literally going opposite the crowd both times. So it's trivial when you look at a graph, I bought here and I sold there. When you actually, if you could have VR that would project the emotions of the moment, and then you're hitting the buy button at that time when, as they say, the time to buy is when there's blood in the streets or whatever, right? Or you get greedy when others are fearful. If you had VR that captured the emotions of the moment and being very contrary to the crowd, it feels very different, Anyway, so too slow is too late, and many things are breaking. Okay, so there's the recent debt ceiling showdown. That was a near miss, but it boosted uncertainty in U.S. debt. It felt like the conversation was different this year. Did you feel like that as well? The more people can deficit spend and borrow without apparent consequence, the more they do so. It's as if you had a seemingly infinite credit card and there were no consequences for decades, and you were like accelerating into the wall, right? Because it just feels like nothing is happening. Hey, we're such a superpower. We're so invincible. Even as the tide is going out, even as we'll get to, Foreign Affairs now agrees it's a multipolar world. China's like the #1 car manufacturer out of nowhere. They're becoming a plane manufacturer. Like all of these graphs, a huge amounts of essentially the US's scope around the world is narrowing very quickly. And its domestic scope, there's massive internal conflict. And yet its ambitions go to the sky, even as state capacity is falling through the floor. Does that make sense? Right. So the economics where you have essentially a sovereign debt crisis, not just brewing, underway, with lots of smaller countries already defaulting, but the big ones yet to come potentially. But you also have massive internal political conflict in the US, and you have massive external superpower conflict between the US and the dragon bear, Russia plus China. And you also have, a couple other factors, which are a huge consequent decline in the US's soft power globally and domestically. So, super majorities of Americans don't trust DC. And abroad, you have, France, Brazil, Israel, even, allies, right, that are trading in yuan or declaring strategic autonomy. Or, Brazil is housing Iranian warships. And even Taiwan said it would shoot down, U.S. planes if they tried to bomb TSMC, right? And that was like a little tempest in a teapot, but it was clear that a lot of countries are kind of going their own way, okay? And then finally, you've got the technological shocks, where, in a sense, for like the ABCs of economic apocalypse for Blue America in particular are, AI, Bitcoin, and China, in the sense that AI takes their jobs and Bitcoin takes their power over money, and China takes potentially their military power. Because lots of the jobs, especially of the Northeast, are lawyer, bureaucrat, doctor. They're like licensed jobs in some way where an AI might be able to do them better, faster, cheaper. And then finally, you have the uncensoring of social media. And that is, what Elon has done with Twitter. But it's also, YouTube is following suit. They have reduced their level of censorship on certain things. And then you also have things like Nostr and Farcast, which are decentralized social media. So that's like a digital glasnost to accompany Bitcoin's digital perestroika. Okay, meaning when the Soviet Union collapsed, you had truly free speech, which was, like a glasnost. And you also had free markets, which is perestroika, and we're having that in the West. So you have like a lot of different shocks hitting at the same time. It is not simply the economic shock, it's in the context of everything else.